Welcome back to Adversary to Ally.
It's time we talked about domestic violence and how it's affecting our lives. The cost is much too high. Let's stop it from destroying our lives. Adversary to ally. Adversary to ally.
How many mothers will cry? How many children would die?
The golden queen. But you got to do more than talk. You got to.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us again this week. For those of you who are new to this show, this is the podcast where men discuss domestic violence and child abuse and what we as men can do to lower the temperature and stop the abuse of women and children. And we are thrilled this week to have a member of law enforcement join us. Let's get right to him and hear what he has to say.
Good morning. My name is Catania. I'm a captain with the Adversary Police Department. I've been in law enforcement for almost 28 years now, and I've befriended over the course of the last year Karina Martin, who has been talking to me over the course of time about family violence issues, domestic violence issues, and she asked me if I would be interested in helping out a little bit with the interview with you today, and I said sure. So that brings me here today.
Well, we certainly appreciate you coming on the show because domestic violence is a very serious problem, and it's a serious problem across the United States. And I was really startled to learn that over the last 20 years, domestic violence has caused the death of an average of 14 people per year. That just startled me. Can you tell us what happens when police go out to a domestic violence scene and what you see when you're out there?
Sure. Well, let me give you a little bit of background on just our town here to start off. During the course of 2021, Adversary Police Department responded to approximately 151 domestic violence type cases. Out of those 150 cases, 89 arrests wound up coming out of those. So we're really roughly around a 50% mark on arrests. Officers will usually respond. It'll usually be two officers and a supervisor to determine what is going on. The first thing that we want to look for is to make sure that there is nobody injured or there's nobody that is going to be a danger to anybody else getting there, because that is a very volatile, very emotionally charged type of case that we're responding to. So two officers and a supervisor will respond to these cases, will determine what happened. We also look to see who the dominant aggressor is in this type of case. If someone is being outright determined to be the dominant aggressor, we will wind up taking enforcement action against that person, which will then trigger other things after the arrest, such as orders of protection that will be put into the system that will wind up going with that person right through the end of the case. In all domestic violence cases, it is the next business day for their court date if an arrest is made. So if an arrest is made on a Thursday, people that were involved will be going to court on that Friday. If an arrest is made on a Friday, people will go to court on the Monday following. If there is danger involved where we think that somebody else that's remaining at the house will be in danger, we develop a plan. We develop a safety plan. We do a lethality assessment on the potential for problems to wind up coming down the road for the person that's left at the house. We take domestic violence here extremely, extremely seriously. It is involved in everybody that is a police officer in Connecticut. When they go through what's called recertification, there is a block of training and updates on domestic violence. So anything new, any new laws, any new penalties, any new statute is reviewed during that course of time when they go through their research process. I do believe that we could be doing more. I think that there should be more training, not only for the police officers, but I think that there should be more benefits and training that is offered to victims and people involved in it, and follow up and other types of, I won't say counseling, but other types of avenues for them to pursue if they believe that they're involved in any type of situation that could become violent in nature, that could wind up becoming an issue where they can be injured or worse. It's definitely on the rise in the time I've been on the job. I like to refer to it for people to wind up having an eye opener. It's an epidemic.
Yes, I do agree. It is definitely an epidemic, and it's everywhere. And I was looking at some of the victims here in Connecticut, and it's from all around Connecticut, from urban areas to suburban areas to rural areas. There just doesn't seem to be there just doesn't seem to be a how should I say? They say that socioeconomic environments are, the lower income people, the less educated people, the higher the incidence of domestic violence. What happens when, let's just say that you go out to a house where a domestic violence incident is taking place? As a rule, how often do you have to go back to that same residence because of domestic violence? Does it ever, I mean, do you ever go in one incident and it just works out and you never have to go back again? Or do you find yourself having to go constantly to a particular residence?
It's a very good question. But to just back up 1 second, where you started as far as a socioeconomic type of delineation between the cases, domestic violence, in my opinion, has affected everybody at any level, no matter what your income is, no matter what your lifestyle is, no matter where you're living. It's definitely it's a broad scope type of problem. It's very, very, prevalent in all classes, all cases, all neighborhoods, all environments. As far as a part of the question that you came up with, Mr. Walker, with the amount of time we actually go back, we do see a lot of cases where we're going back again and again and again. But as we go back, we start developing a paper trail. So officers responding to that call, to that house, let's have an example, 123 Main Street. If we're going to 123 Main Street on Monday and we wind up handling a case there, whether it winds up just being documentation or an arrest, when we wind up responding to that case again, our dispatch center has that address flagged saying there was an issue there on Monday, you're going back. The officers responding also know if there are weapons in the house, if people in the house have permits for weapons. What was the issue when we went there the first time? Is it different this time? 90% of the time we go to one of these calls, it has to do with custodial problems, child custody issues.
Oh, I didn't realize that. Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. Obviously, the other things that come into play are the finances, occupations, job demands, infidelity, all those things come into play. But I would say the majority of these cases that we get called over in a great many times have to do with custody issues, child care, who's got the child, if it's a couple that is on the way to divorce or in separation. Many times when we go there, it has to do with who is supposed to have the child at that time, what's the custody. And we try our best not to get involved in that because it becomes more or less a civil type of action with, you're supposed to have the two kids on Monday, it's Monday and you're not taking them. But that usually stems into, or branches off into something more serious than just the base reason as to why we went there.
Now, I understand that Connecticut is in some cities or towns in Connecticut, they're responding to domestic violence incidents a little differently these days by sending out social workers along with police to kind of, I guess, pour some water on the anger, so to speak. What do you think this is a good idea? Do you think this helps police, or do you think it hinders them when they go to a residence where domestic violence is taking place?
I think it could help if after the situation was assessed. I don't think that we would be doing ourselves or social workers or therapists any good at all by having them go into a fully emotionally charged scene and wind up putting themselves in the line of danger.
Mm-hmm.
On that vein, we do have different entities of contacts where we wind up handing out contact information for people to wind up being able to get somebody to help them out down the road. I think what we will wind up seeing eventually is we will have almost a pool of these social workers that will be on call, so to speak, that when we call them, if needed, they can respond or what have you. I think it's a great concept. I think we just have to maybe take a step back, pump the brakes a little bit before we wind up sending anybody in there into a dangerous situation. You don't want to set someone up to miserably fail, but on the other side of the coin, you're looking for the betterment of who's involved. So I think it will have its place eventually.
I was going to ask you that. How dangerous is it when police arrive on the scene? Or in most situations, is it out of control already when you get there? Or when you get there, are people able to calmly talk to police? Maybe not each other, but are they calmly able to talk to police? Or is the situation so volatile that police have to think of alternative measures?
I think it's roughly about a 50-50 thing. 50% of the time we get the call and it's a verbal only argument. And when we get there, people just need an intermediary to go over things as to what happened. There are sometimes, though, we go and it's a physically charged environment where people have wound up engaged in some type of physical altercation with one another. And this is where the danger comes in, because now you have someone that is not really attached to the combatants. They don't know this person coming in, and now you're going to come into someone's house and you're going to either take someone out of the house or you're going to wind up, getting involved in a very personal, highly emotional, energized situation. And that's where the danger comes in. A lot of times, if it does wind up getting physical, one of the two, or maybe both of the combatants, may have the outlook that they don't have anything really to lose. And that winds up getting into a very bad situation for the officer going. I mean, we have officers that, and have been around a little while, but we have officers that are going in that are considerably younger than the people that are involved in the situation. And they're going to be saying to themselves, okay, I'm going to wind up having this kid come in here and tell me that he's going to take me out of my own house, or that I shouldn't have done this, or what I did was wrong. And it winds up creating a problem in and of itself. So that's why we send two officers and a supervisor. The supervisor's there basically to monitor and to watch out for any type of liability factor that would come in. But now, and I believe it's very helpful to not only the officer, but to the people calling as well. Now all of our officers are going into these calls with body cams, and everything that they're encountering is being recorded, and it's being viewed from somebody other than the 2 or 3 or 4 people that are in the house, because you can't get rid of the video. And the
Right.
video is going to tell the story as to what you were walking into. There have been some times going into these calls that it is so emotionally charged that the expectation is that once the police get there, we're going to solve everything. But that usually is not the case, and there usually has to be a couple of more steps that have to be taken for it to have a peaceful outcome. But you are right. It is a very dangerous, highly charged, highly emotional environment that you're going into. You're going into somebody's house to possibly take someone away. You have kids involved. You have, all the things that people don't really think about. Pets, dogs. You're in a kitchen. What's in a kitchen? All types of cutlery. Is there a gun in the house? What is the history here? What has led that person to call 911 to get to that point? And it becomes a little bit problematic because everybody's on edge, right? The anxiety level on everybody is raising drastically. And for someone to wind up getting to a point where they need to make that phone call, that's where it winds up getting a little bit dangerous.
We're going to take a quick break just to remind people that Adversary to Ally is a joint partnership between Real Talk, Real People and Karina Martin of Mothers of Victims Equality. We hope through these type of conversations, getting men to speak out, that we can stop the violence against women and children. Now let's get back to the captain and hear more of what he has to say. Now, I think Connecticut changed the law. You used to go to a domestic violence situation and you arrested both participants, so to speak. Now there's, I believe there's something called you arrest who you believe is the aggressor in the situation and remove that person. I'm wondering what these men, in your experience, what these men say after they commit, say, an act of violence that takes the life of their spouse, their children, or whatever. Do any of these men, what do they say when police arrest them and take them away, and their loved ones are laying in the house dead? Do they express regret? Are they still angry? What do these men express to police as they take them away, so to speak?
Well, I have to knock on wood here that I have not been involved in dealing with one-on-one anybody who has just wound up taking the life of a loved one during one of these cases. But being in the business as long as I have and talking to officers who have been around these type of cases, a lot of the times these people involved, it could be the male, it could also be the female that was involved. They could say that they just, saw red. They were at the end of the rope and they had it, and they did not have any logic going into any decisions that they were making at the time. But to get back to the first part of what you said, Connecticut has now adopted what's called the dominant aggressor or the more involved person. And that was to do away with a lot of the dual arrests. Because earlier in my career, you'd go to a domestic, if somebody was involved in a domestic violence case, they both were getting arrested.
Right.
Now it's the dominant aggressor who really was the one that was the catalyst behind this thing starting and getting off track. And it's helped out very much with not only solving the issue, but removing the problem. And it's helped out a lot too, where we're not going in there and saying, or we're not going in there and prior to us getting there, the caller being reticent to call because they don't want to get arrested. A lot of people used to tell me they don't want to pick up the phone and call the police because they're going to get arrested for a domestic violence case, even when they didn't have anything to do with it. And that has quelled that a little bit now, where people are more at ease when they call to know they didn't do anything wrong. They were not the aggressor in this. and the other person winds up getting arrested. Um, this whole thing, this whole domestic violence um, case law that came into effect started several years ago before I started as a police officer with a case out in Torrington. The Tracy Thurman law, that's what it used to be called. And that had to do with police officers going to one of these cases, and Tracy Thurman was basically involved in this domestic violence case. They left, or an arrest wasn't made, and her husband almost killed her. So people also need to understand too, when an arrest is made at a domestic violence case, the state of Connecticut is the complainant. The state of Connecticut is the complainant that winds up mandating that arrest. It's not Capt. Catania going in there and saying, I'm arresting you. The state of Connecticut is mandating Capt. Catania to arrest you because of the violence that was portrayed or acted upon prior to us getting there. So it's looked at in a totally different manner now with the dominant aggressor type of ruling.
What about neighbors? How big a role do neighbors play in this? Do you get calls from neighbors who say, hey, at 123 Main Street, I hear screaming, I think something. Do neighbors, because there used to be a time when I was growing up where people didn't get involved. It was considered, somebody else's business, family business, or whatever. I'm wondering, has that attitude changed and people will pick up the phone and dial 911 now when they think a domestic incident is taking place?
I won't pretend to speculate on the percentage, but in my opinion, it's a large percentage of the time we respond to these calls. It is a call from a neighbor. It's a call from somebody next door. It's a call from a kid or a child in another room that's calling. And they are the ones that are calling to say, something's going on here.
Something's going on.
A lot of the times it's noise, yelling, verbal disagreements. But there are some times when you do have the unfortunate occasion for a neighbor or someone in the neighborhood to witness a physical confrontation. And I think that says a lot about the community policing aspect and how we look at domestic violence here, especially in the town I work in. We're very involved in the community. Everybody sees the ads. If you see something, say something.
Say something, right.
And, sometimes that gets a little bit on people's nerves because people say, oh, I don't want to call over something so silly. My advice to anybody out there that's watching this, if you do see something that you feel in any way, shape, or form is wrong, call. I'd rather us go to any call, every call, than to not go to that one and have something happen.
If something happens.
Yeah.
One final question here. What would you like to see the state do to help police in these type of situations? What resources do you think that you do not have now that you would like to have to handle these type of situations? More personnel, better training? What would you like to have?
Well, obviously, we could always use more personnel because, whether that personnel be another police officer or whether that personnel be somebody who's highly trained in the domestic violence type of scenario base. But I also think the state, if they look at this through a little bit of a broader lens, would have to think this is something that is an epidemic. This is something that, whether it be through additional training for law enforcement, additional training for maybe people in the court system, additional training for any resident, maybe more of an advertisement type of base thing. It's kind of funny, comical in a way. Pretty soon we'll be getting into fall and we'll be seeing all the election advertisements. Vote for me, I endorse this message, I did this, I did that. How about maybe once a day at the dinner hour, when everybody's watching the same newscast 50 times over and over and over again, the same news, how about an infomercial on domestic violence? There's people out there to help you. There's people out there that you can call, reach out. 90% of these people that are involved have been verbally battered prior to ever being struck. You know, call somebody, talk to somebody. Somebody should put together an advertisement. I mean, how many times do we see advertisements during the course of the night for a different prescription medicine?
Right.
Yeah.
We're overwhelmed with those.
Right. You know, and all the side effects that we need to hear while we're having dinner, right? We need to hear all those side effects. Let's think about putting something on, maybe a 30-second commercial on, hey, here's what we can do to prevent something bad from happening. If it touches one person, if it helps one person, it's made all the difference in the world. So.
Well, Captain, we certainly appreciate you coming on. You've given us a lot of information, and we certainly appreciate it. And let's hope that through these kind of conversations, getting police involved in these conversations and so forth, that at least hopefully we can lower the heat, because it is really becoming, certainly through my eyes, just very disturbing to see these women and children being so brutalized, thrown off bridges, shot, burned, all of this. And, it's just very disturbing to me as a human being to know that somebody is being beaten and murdered like that over nothing. So I'm hoping that podcasts like this, discussions with people such as yourself, can, if nothing else, find some kind of way to lower the heat and help save lives. So I certainly do appreciate you coming on. Is there anything that you want to add?
No, I appreciate the opportunity to come on. I think it's a great idea to wind up getting it out there, getting some type of support, further support from what we have now. And if there's anything I could ever do, I'd be willing to talk again or meet with you again or whatever. I appreciate the opportunity, and I just hope that if there's anybody out there that is going through any type of issue, they use the resources available to them to prevent a tragedy from happening.